I can share my contact number, but my mail. I mean, if you have any doubt, you can share it or ask it over mail. This is my mail ID. I start in 24 minutes. Yes, okay. Okay, welcome to the final tier session of Design of Steel Structures taught by Professor Damodar Maiti. I am Trisha Chakraborty, one of the course teaching assistants. I am a PhD student at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. I'll start with a recap of the course. Today's topic is slab bases. It is a brief topic and does not. I don't think that too much details will be needed for the exams or any undergraduate course because it's a very specific topic as well. It is just for the sake of completion that we will look at this topic. There are two broad branches of structural engineering: analysis and design. Analysis is the forward problem where we are given the structural dimensions, the boundary conditions, the applied loads, and the materials, and we have to find the response induced in the structure in the terms of forces, stresses, or deflections and strains. So, like in structural analysis, we have to like drawing a bending moment diagram, shear force diagram, finding out the axial forces in the truss members. These are analysis because the entire structure and the entire connectivity, everything is given. The boundary conditions like fixed support, pinned support, roller supports are given, and the applied loads are also given. And we want to find out the response. And design is the uh, kind of the inverse problem. So we are given the loads that has to be withstood by the structure, and we are given some criteria on maximum deflection. So the loads to be withstood are uh, commonly dead load, live load, wind load, earthquake load, and then in seaside structure, tidal load. There are some other there are a lot of categories, but generally in buildings and bridges, dead life, wind and earthquake load are the common ones, with all the details that what is the dead load is basically the self weight, but the details of the live load to be considered and the calculation of wind and earthquake loads are given in IS codes IS 875 and IS 1893, which is the earthquake design code. So according to that, we have to take some forces that I want to design my structure against. And so basically, I want that my structure as a whole should hold up these loads, like under these condition, under these loads it should not collapse, it should stay. And there should also be some serviceability criteria, so from deflection criteria. So, and in each structural element I will have some limit, like the beam should not, the midpoint of the beam should not deflect more than this, the sway in the structure should not be more than this. These are given in terms of deflection, so millimeters generally. And given all of these, we have to find the optimum size of the structural elements. We have to fix what material we are going to use, what reinforcement, how we are going to connect them. So design is basically, I just know the basic architectural plan, so I know where the columns are roughly going to be, what kind of rooms, the toilets, the kitchen, where they are all going to be. And then I will find out the loads that I need to design it against from the code. And then I want to fix the material properties, the geometric properties of, and the connectivity of each of the elements. So that starts from slabs, then beams, then columns, then foundation. All of this we have to do. And in steel design, especially, connections is an important part. So the bolt connection, weld connection, all of these are part of design. And generally we use two materials, concrete and steel. Concrete is the most versatile material for construction, and you would already have undergone a UG course, design of RC structures. So, reinforced cement concrete. The reinforcement is there because concrete has very less or almost no strength in tension. So the steel reinforcement is there to take the tension, because any kind of bending, any kind of torsion, there is that tension does arise. Or only in columns, even only if a column is loaded fully through its centroidal axis, then there is only compression. But even if there is eccentric loading, there will be some kind of bending or torsion. And we know that when there is a bending profile, there is a compression zone and a tension zone. So this, in RCC structures, the steel takes the tension and the concrete takes the compression. And concrete is the most versatile material for construction, because firstly it is quite cheap, and then it is very commonly available. Like the concrete, the ingredients of concrete, therefore cement, water, coarse aggregates, and fine aggregates. The coarse aggregates are generally in the form of stone chips, and the fine aggregates are sand. And cement we get from the industry, and we manufacture in the industry, and water. So these are very commonly available ingredients. They can be mixed at the site, and the wet concrete, or the semi-solid, semi-liquid kind of concrete, it is poured into the formwork, and it can be cast into any shapes. There we have to keep it, like we have to let it stay. We have to cure the concrete for 28 days till it gains its maximum strength. But that is very versatile, because it is easy to mix the concrete at the site. And the laborers and the masons are also in India or anywhere, I think they are most used to dealing with concrete structures. So we can use unskilled labor, we can cast it into any shapes right at the site, so it is faster as well. But then why do we use steel? Now, RCC structures also have steel inside, but there are also steel structures which are made of only steel. So the some factors in favor of steel are that steel is a much stronger material than conventional concrete in both tension and compression. Steel has a high strength to weight ratio. Steel structures are lightweight, because generally, since steel has so much more strength, the cross sectional areas of the steel sections are generally tend to be much lesser than concrete cross sectional areas. So steel structures are lightweight, and steel is also ductile compared to concrete, which means that even after yielding, concrete is a brittle material, relatively. Brittle and ductile are kind of relative terms. So, for a brittle material, after yielding, the structure rapidly collapses. Like maybe a little bit, just after yielding, the ultimate strength comes really fast, and there is a little bit of deformation and it collapses. While a ductile material, after yielding, there will be a lot of deformation before it actually reaches the ultimate strength and collapses. While how the in a way this helps is that it absorbs some energy, and it also gives a lot of warning time to for evacuation or for major repair. It gives us a chance to address the problem. Instead of like just after yielding, if it collapses, it will be anything that is sudden is very bad in structural design, in any structure. So we would want things to be gradual. So suppose if I'm seeing that if in a steel structure, if there is a lot of deformation, suppose a connection is failing, but it we see a connection was like this at 90 degree, then it is like this. It has not yet yielded. It has yielded, but it has not yet failed. We see that there's something has happened, and we can come and replace that like we can call a structural health monitoring engineer. They can like they will refer that this needs repair, so that part can be repaired. And instead, if it had just failed immediately, then if the connection failed, the beam will fail, the column will fail, the adjacent beams will also fail. So if everything fails together, we can't like eventually we are going to need a lot more we have to pour a lot more money to recover that part. And also in case of earthquakes or fatal wind loading, fatal earthquake loading, if the structure collapses, it might also cause a difference between life and death. So ductility is a very important property in structural engineering. Steel is, however, much costlier than concrete, so we don't use steel. Like we don't just use steel everywhere. We use steel in structures with high demands, like tall towers or long span bridges and all that. And in roof trusses also we'll use because it's a very lightweight material. Why do we need design? The components individually and the entire structure should withstand the load throughout its lifespan, satisfying serviceability criteria. So, withstanding the load is the about the ultimate collapse states, the ultimate or collapse limit states. Serviceability criteria are the serviceability limit states, and a lifespan of the structure has to be mentioned because today, if I draw a stress strain curve of a material, there is no guarantee that 10 or 20 years into the future it's going to be the same, because there are some cyclic loading, fatigue loading, creep. There are some phenomena like the material properties are also a little time dependent. It doesn't rapidly change. Like in 1 day, 2 day, the material is not going to degrade, but continued loading over a very long period of time does make the material degrade. So initially, I have designed the structure for a particular stress strain behavior or a particular material behavior, right? Then after 50 years, the material has degraded. So it might not be enough at that point. So after its lifespan is gone, like 50 years, 75 years, it doesn't mean that you have to break down the structure, like pull it down and reconstruct it entirely. But it might need major repair. So we should consult a structural health monitoring engineer to see. They will carry out tests, like there are some tests like the hammer test and the UPV, ultrasonic pulse velocity test, to check the health of the structure. So that should be done after the lifespan is over. And even before if it shows some signs of fatigue or or deformation, we might need to consult an SHM engineer. But after a lifespan, we must do that. To properly design a structure, we have to ensure it is economical to construct without compromising safety. So that this will lead to a cost-effective design. So there is always a balance that we need to strike between the safety of a structure and the economy of the structure. Because if we use very expensive materials like very high strength, high tensile steel, very high grade concrete, and we make large columns, large beams, like the sections are all very large, what happens is it might also hamper the functioning. Like if you don't want a huge column in the middle of your room, right? But apart from that also, the more material we use or the more high strength material we use, it is going to rapidly increase the cost of construction. And that is also important because structural engineering is very closely related to the practical usage of it. So we have to keep it practical. We cannot make it infinitely safe. At the same time, we cannot make it very risky also. So there is a level that we have to strike a balance. So that is a cost effective design. That's a certain amount of safety as prescribed by the codes has to be maintained, while we also try to make it economical at the same time. And this requires knowledge of the design procedure in detail. Now, as I say that just following IS 800 2007, which is this code, like the steel design code, following this, most of the structural elements in a steel structure can be designed. But so you can just follow, and not just you, any layman, anyone who doesn't have a degree in civil engineering can also, with a little bit of study, follow the code and design. But the problem comes when it is a specific structure, like when it is a unique structure, a novel structure, then we need to know the design procedure and all the avenues open to us, so that we can that is where the expertise of an engineer comes in. That if you have more knowledge, you can tackle a wide range of problems rather than the routine problems. Some mechanical properties of steel. Physical properties of structural steel as detailed by this clause 2.2.4.1 of IS 800 2007. which is the Indian standard code for steel design. Irrespective of its grade, it can be taken as unit mass of steel or the density is 7850 kg per meter cube. Modulus of elasticity or Young's modulus E is 2 into 10 to the power 5 megapascal. It is the initial slope of the stress strain curve in the linear regime. Poisson's ratio mu is zero point 0.3. Modulus of rigidity or bulk modulus G is 0.769 into 10 to the power 5 megapascal, and coefficient of thermal expansion alpha is 12 into 10 to the power minus 6 per degree centigrade. The principal mechanical properties of steel important in design are the yield stress Fy and the tensile stress Fu, which do vary with grade. So here, irrespective of its grade, these properties don't really change much, but the yield stress Fy and ultimate stress Fu are what define a grade of steel. So they vary with the steel grade. So the stress strain curve is something like this, the elasticity curve. This is obtained by when a cylindrical specimen is made to undergo a tensile test. So the force or this P on both ends. This P is ramped up in steps like suppose 5 kilonewton, 10 kilonewton, 15 kilonewton, or 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. It is ramped up, and a measuring device, a response measurement device like a strain gauge, will measure the strain at each step. At each step, I have to increase the force, pause, check the strain, then again increase the force. It is generally done by machines like machinery. We do not do it by hand, like by we don't increase the force on our own. Of course, there are some testing machine, like there is one universal testing machine called UTM, I think, universal tensile testing machine, something like that. Anyway, so then we divide the P by the cross sectional area, we get the stress, and we plot that. This is a continuous curve, but when we have carried out an experiment, we will get some discrete points which we will join to get the nature. And these are the A, B, C, D, E, F are the special points. This is the elastic region, this is the partially plastic region. It's corresponding to C and D. We can see that here the graph was very steep, and suddenly here the slope falls suddenly. So this is where the yielding has occurred. So this approximately here is where the Fy is, and E is the highest point. The ordinate or the y coordinate is highest here, right? So the stress corresponding to E here somewhere is the ultimate stress strain. So this here Fy will be here and Fu will be here. So A is the limit of proportionality, the point where the linear nature of the stress strain graph ceases. B is the elastic limit, the limiting point for the condition that material behaves elastically but Hooke's law does not apply. For most practical purposes, it can be assumed that limit of proportionality and elastic limits are the same. Beyond elastic limit, there will be some permanent deformation or permanent set when the load is removed. C and D are the upper yield point and the lower yield point, points after which strain increases without correspondingly high increase in load or stress. So that is when the slope reduces, because it's a stress by delta strain is the slope, right? So when strain increases a lot without correspondingly high increase in load or stress, the delta stress by delta strain decreases. That's why at each point the slope falls. E is the ultimate or maximum tensile stress, the point where necking starts. F is the fracture point where the material breaks, but we are concerned mostly up to E. Like after E, the material will flow on its own, the stress even reduces and it goes and breaks. So we are concerned about this point. The roll steel sections, which the Bureau of Indian Standards publishes in IS Handbook number 1, ISP 61, it tabulates the weight per unit length, geometric dimensions, other dimensions like the plastic section modulus, a moment of inertia, the center of gravity from one particular axis, and all that. Yes, so although sorry for the interruption. Yes, so
Okay, ma'am.
okay, and in each row, the uh, name of the section is given. There's a unique label provided to each section, like ISM MB 200, ISMB 300, and all these dimensions corresponding to that are mentioned in the table, in the row of the table. Like each row is dedicated to one label. So D is the overall depth, TF is thickness of flange, thickness of web, the width of flange or the half width, and all that are mentioned. So I section, channel section, angle section, T section, box sections, like these hollow ones, these uh, solid ones, all of these are mentioned. And from here, like by now you would have seen that where exactly we need these properties. They're very important, like for compression members to we need the slenderness ratio. For beams, for the laterally restrained and unrestrained ones, we need the moment of inertia shifted by like cxx square, a into cxx square. So we need all these properties. You have just to consult the sp6, and just by looking at these sections you cannot get the details, because there is some kind of tapering, some kind of rounding here, which is not easy to calculate. All these properties are not easy to calculate. If it is a built up section, like there is one plate, rectangular plate, making an I section, that you can calculate geometrically because it's simple. But all of these standard sections we cannot generally calculate, so we need to refer to a sp6. Okay, the modes of failure in steel material is bending, local buckling, shear buckling, web crushing and buckling, and also web crippling, lateral torsional buckling. All of these we have encountered by now because the course is almost over now. Lateral torsional buckling is there in beams. Web crushing and buckling is there in generally in columns. Shear buckling, local buckling, all of these are common compression members, or in local compression in other types of members also. And bending and shear comes everywhere. And deflection is a serviceability type of failure. Like all of these modes of failure. So whenever I have to design a particular type of element, what we do is we list down all the modes of failure. So I list down all the ways it can fail. Corresponding to each, there will be a limit state, and I have to satisfy all those limit states. So this leads us to the design philosophies, the working stress method and the limit state method. The earlier codes were generally all followed the working stress method, like long back, 20-30 years back. But the current revisions all work with limit state method. The basic philosophy here is the design action should be less than the design strength for each limit state. And as I said, each limit state corresponds to each mode of failure, each possible mode of failure. So I basically, for the structure not to fail, for a particular element not to fail, none of the modes of failure can happen, right? So I have to individually satisfy all the modes of failure. So design action, so the basically the load into the factor of safety
Uh,
should be less.
Ma'am,
Yes.
sorry for the interruptions. I am also working in the steel structural design, ma'am.
Okay.
Um, Actually, we are facing one issue. Um, we are doing the lot of FGD plant in only using limit state only, but specifically the Karnataka Power Plant Corporation, the KPCL asked for steel structural design want a working stress method.
Okay. Okay.
What
So
is the major difference? What will happen here?
So working stress method, what happens is makes the design little uneconomical, because in work, I mean, in conceptually in working stress method, the basic concept difference is here. Here we can see that in the ultimate stress strength is here, but working stress method assumes that once the material yields, the material becomes useless. So it uses in working stress method the Fy terms keeps coming everywhere. While in this work limit state method, we apply up to Fu, and we apply a factor of safety in the denominator. I think even in working stress method there is a factor of safety in the denominator, but if it is suppose Fe 410, in in limit state method I will use 410 as my capacity, while in limit working stress method I will use 250, which is the yield strength of Fe 410.
Okay.
So the
It will increase the cost of the
It
um,
should, it
using
should.
material.
Yes, it should, but it's much easier to apply. Like working stress method was a very easy method to apply, so that is one of the advantages that is always. I mean, I have not worked with the working stress method, but I have studied that design wise it is much simple. Like limit state method is a little complicated. So maybe
Okay,
that
okay.
is why they are telling you to, maybe it will save up on time. Like time is also important, right? In in the cost analysis, it's not only about the material, the time of construction and everything matters. So maybe the expertise of the workers there is in the working stress method, or it could be
Okay, ma'am.
something like
Yes,
that.
ma'am. At the same time, they mentioned the tender document, ma'am.
The what tender document?
Yes, sir. In the tender document, they mentioned civil foundation and all the things happened in limit state method, but the steel structural design happened in working stress method. This is
Okay.
possible, correct, ma'am?
So steel will be in working stress method, and what will be in sorry, and what will be
The
in
civil foundations.
the civil foundation?
Yes.
Civil foundation means it will be steel, right? In a steel structure,
No,
okay, the
the
foundation
steel
will be
structure bottom concrete, no,
okay,
ma'am.
okay, okay. That
The base plate location.
yes, yes, yes. Okay. Yes, it is possible since in structural design in any structure, we generally design the elements separately.
Okay.
We don't have a overall design, right? When
Hmm.
like in if you are using packages like STAD or something, we design it like we make it as the same structure. But one thing, if the foundation has to follow a different philosophy, what you can do
Okay.
is that make the structure like make the superstructure, like model
Hmm.
it, and in the
Yes, ma'am.
bottom just put fixities, just make the all the column bases fixed
Okay.
without modeling the foundation. Then design that part using working stress method. Instead there will be some option of working stress method, I think, or any
Yes,
design
ma'am.
software. And
Yes.
then what you do is, or at the base of all those columns, you will see that you can like read of like when you run the analysis of stat. First,
Hmm.
what stat does, it first analyzes the structure, then it gives the design output. So once the
Okay.
analysis has been done, you take the output for each column, take the output forces and moments that is developing there. There will be
Yes.
x direction force, y direction force, some moment, like it's a 3D structure, then
Yes,
three
ma'am.
forces, three moments. Take those as input,
Yes, ma'am.
then make a separate file, then make a separate file and make a foundation. And in
Hmm.
the location of those columns, apply those loads in the opposite direction as applied load. That will be just the
Yes,
foundation.
correct.
Yes,
Hmm.
and then put the limit, like there, design it by the limit state method. Put the limit state method as the option.
Okay.
I think that should work. Shouldn't that?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, why I am asking means we are doing a lot of NTPC projects and all the things, but KPL asking like different. But I don't know. I don't have that knowledge to argue that people. So that
Okay,
time I'm not
okay,
asking this question. Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
okay,
Thank you
okay,
for this information.
okay, okay. Anything else you want to ask?
No, ma'am. You can continue, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Yes, so design philosophies and now the connections. There are two types. Connections are integral parts of any steel structures that have a major role in overall integrity. Standard parts are properly connected to create the steel structures, and connections make up a large amount of the cost of structural steel. So, connection design should be given top priority, and also not just the cost. Connections also, since they contribute to the integrity of the structure. So if the connections don't work properly, then the whole assumption of the entire building or the entire structure fails, because I'm assuming that for example the column to the foundation the column to the foundation connection, I'm assuming it fixed, I'm modeling it as fixed. But if the connection cannot provide a fixity there, if there is some kind of rotation there, then my entire behavior will change. So connections have to be perfect, like almost like nothing can be perfect, but connection is particularly important because it governs the entire behavior of the structure much more than one single beam or anything. So for safety and structural economy, connections are very important. Bolts and wells are the two types of connections. We have already seen how they're designed. Now, this is a slab base we are looking at. When column loads are large and bearing strength of concrete is low, then failure can occur, like it's a crushing kind of failure. Thus, column loads are first distributed on the steel column bases, which are then placed on concrete blocks. Base plate not only transfers the column load to the concrete block safely, but also keeps the proper alignment of column and plan. ensuring verticality of column and controls column deflection. So if the column is a little inclined, it has a lot of manifestation. First, but it will be it will automatically introduce an eccentricity, and eccentricity is not a good thing to have because it can lead to bending, torsion, which we have not designed for. It can make it more prone to buckling. So we need to ensure the alignment, which is also lacing and batten plates. Also, one of the most important purpose of lacing plates and batten plates was to maintain that the alignment should be perfect. And column bases are mainly subjected to bearing pressures from below and bending moments and shear forces. When soil is having very low bearing capacity, large concrete blocks may become uneconomical and the bridge footing is resorted to. Column caps are the plates provided between the member, transferring the reaction to the column and to the top of the column. Column supporting beams or roof trusses, like this is a column and this is a column cap. Then this is the cap of the column, and then the other things are here. Like column cap is an intermediate thing between the column and some other structural element. Types of column bases: column base transmitting direct load, column base transmitting bending load in additional to direct load. So this is a column. It is the column is perfectly centered. The alignment is perfectly symmetrical. So there is one bolt on this side, one bolt on this side. The both are angles of same dimensions. Here it is like a uniformly distributed load. So it is only transferring compressive force. But there can also be, like, if the force was not around the center, or if this connection was not symmetrical, then it will also incorporate a bending moment into this. For axially loaded column, the bearing pressure distribution between the base plate and concrete pedestal is assumed to be uniform, like this, because it's a perfectly symmetrical structure, you can see. Column bases which transmit moment in addition to axial load, and angles anchored to the footing are used with angles being designed for the uplift forces. Okay, so basically what happens is, what is the major difference if a bending comes in the column. The column suppose the column is not centrally loaded. Suppose it's loaded at a tip or at an eccentricity, so a bending moment like this comes. Now, not only the column, I am already designing against the bending moment, that is separate. But in the base, what happens is a force like this is coming. So this part undergoes an extra bearing, and this part undergoes an uplift force. So uplift force is a like is a like a critical thing, because it's not easy to visualize. But what we have to do is we have to anchor this down. So this kind of angle connections with bolting, it these bolts basically, suppose this is an angle connection, this is an angle connection, it is bolted, like this is the column, this is the base, and they are bolted together. When this happens, these bolts are under tension and these bolts are under compression. So you have to, like, this is a topic, or any topic in structural design. You have to visualize the behavior of the structure. Only then, like, always you cannot just rely on plus minus, plus force will be tension, minus force will be compression. That is a very like a very bad way of looking at things. Everything is not mathematical. You have to visualize it and see what is happening. So since there will be a bending, there will be partly a uplift force on one side and a downward force on another side. So we have to take care of the tension as well. These are some typical welded column bases. Horizontal plate stiffeners may be placed between the column flanges to maintain the distance. Slab base: when column is subjected only to axial force, then column base plate can be designed assuming a uniform base pressure. For small loads, a steel plate. Okay, these are theory. Let us move to the design of. Even if a column is subjected to direct axial load only, there are also nominal angle sections are provided in order to keep the column in place and to resist tension during erection and connection. These angles may be safely be omitted in case base plate is shop welded to the column. Shop welding is assumed to be safer than site welding. We know that from the factors of safety. Also, we see shop welding has lower factors of safety. So I am assuming that it has greater quality control. Depending on the values of axial load and bending moment coming over the column, it may be possible that the whole column base is under compression, or a part of the base is under compression and part under tension. Hold down bolts. These hold down bolts are the bolts under tension, are provided to resist tension forces, which also help in fixing the column to the base. The thickness of the base plate is designed from consideration of bending of the portion of base plate that extends beyond the column profile. In case where such projections are large, or the loads are very heavy, or the moments are large, there the thickness of the base plate may be reduced by using vertical stiffeners. Like the thickness will also have a serviceability limit, because if that base becomes very, like if the column base becomes very very thick, then the foundation placement might, there might be problem, because the foundation also has to be placed at a certain depth. We cannot, like since the soil behavior, the bearing pressure of soil, bearing strength of soil varies according to the depth. There are some considerations that I want to make my column here and not lower than that. So I cannot make the slab base very thick. There can be other, that is a serviceability requirement. That is not technically a collapse requirement. The projection of slab base beyond the column profile acts as cantilever, and thus maximum bending moment occurs at the edge of the column. We know that in cantilever beam, the fixed end has the highest moment, right? The slab tends to bend simultaneously about two principal axes of the slab, so it bends like this, and I think it bends like this as well. Therefore, the stresses induced in one direction are influenced by the stresses due to the bending in other axis. A Poisson's ratio of 0.3 is generally used to account for this effect. We know that Poisson's ratio is a property that it says that if there is a sigma xx, due to the Poisson's ratio, there will also develop a sigma yy in the structure. So basically, this is the column. This is the top view. So this is an I section. This is the column, like this out of the plane, and this rectangular thing is the top view of the column base. The column goes and is connected to here. So this is the side view. This is the top view. This is the side view. This is the column base. This is the column, and here there is a bearing pressure here, and this is acts as a cantilever, like this part and this part, like imagine it as an inverted cantilever. Like if you draw on the other side, you will see there's a downward loading on a cantilever, that kind. And this thickness into the plane from the side view, look at this, into the plane there is, there is some width, like this width, but I just assume that along this axis we see a 1 millimeter, like a 1 millimeter thickness. Then let W be the intensity of bearing pressure from concrete below the base plate. Then maximum bending moment is, we know that it's WL square by 2, right? So W into 1 into A by 2. Similarly, consider a 1 millimeter thick strip of slab projection on a y-axis that will give W again. So this is one side view. This is one side view from this side. Look at it from this side as well. Then this will be separate. Then the width will be B. Here it's A. Here
Ma'am,
it's B1.
what is that 1 mm thick strip?
1 strip here is basically, that this W here is Newton per millimeter square, right? The W is the intensity, the pressure intensity. So suppose this is L, and this is, suppose this is L1, this is L2. Okay,
Okay.
so then the L1 into L2 is the area, the cross sectional area of this entire footing, entire slab base, and the force is F. Suppose then F by L1 L2, that is the intensity in terms of pressure. So W, it's force by millimeter square. The unit is force divided by length square. But in since we are treating this, like now instead of treating this entire thing together, what we do is, imagine a strip like this. Imagine a strip like this, and then we treat it like a beam. This part is just a beam with, this is half the width, as if this is as if this is the fixity. This is a cantilever beam. This is a cantilever beam. Just imagine a small strip of it. So for now to get the, now to basically, and now in cantilever beam, what happens is, we know the cantilever beam under uniformly distributed load W. That W is in Newton per millimeter, right? That is force per unit length. So from this pressure intensity to get the length intensity, we have to multiply it with the, with this width. So to make it simple, instead of taking a general width, we just take a 1 millimeter width here. So W into 1 is the length intensity along this cantilever beam. So here, for this part, I'm taking W a square by 2. Here it's W a square by 2. And then similarly, I'm going to take a strip like this, a beam like this. Here again, I'm W into 1 is the intensity along this beam. And here it's B by 2. Here it's again B by 2. Do you get it?
Okay.
So this is one strip taken along this, then there's another strip taken like this. So W a square by 2, W B square by 2. The net moment is,
Okay, ma'am.
thank you. The net moment is W a square by 2 minus 0.3 W B square by 2. This is minus because that is how the Poisson's ratio works. The epsilon xx is like sigma xx by E minus nu into sigma yy by E, that kind of. It's it's due to the confinement in both. It has some solid mechanics or elasticity theory behind it, but this is a formula you can remember. Moment capacity of the plate is given by 1.2 Fy Zd, where Zd is the elastic section modulus, which we will get from SP6. The moment capacity of 1 mm strip is 1.2 into Fy. Okay, so not from SP6, because like this is we are using only a plate, only a rectangular plate, and as I said, for rectangular cross sections we can find all these properties manually because it's simple. It's just from simple solid mechanics. So Ts is the thickness of the base plate. This thickness, don't confuse it with this A and B and all this L1 and 2 I said. Thickness is this one. Like in the vertical plane, if you look at the side view, then the thickness. So 1 into Ts square by 6, that is the elastic section modulus. So 1.2 Fy Ts square by 6, and equating this like this M net but with the MP, we get a formula. So applying the partial safety factor, we get like the this is the gamma m naught. So 1.2 Fy by gamma m naught. Ts square by 6 is w by 2. This quantity a square minus 0.3 b square. We just do some algebra here and we get the thickness of the base plate, which is what we want. And the thickness which we are providing should be greater than this minimum thickness. This is the minimum thickness, we have to provide it more than that. And okay, it must be greater than the column flange thickness. So why is that? This is the column flange thickness. Okay, there will be some. This will be some other criteria. So suppose the column flange thickness is 12 mm, and I am seeing that from this I am getting minimum as 11. Then I will provide 12. So whichever is the larger of the two, I am going to provide that minimum. Okay, so that's this is a very small.
Ma'am,
Yes, yes.
go to the last slide, ma'am.
This one. Yes.
Before slide. Yes, ma'am. Here, the t squared by 6.
Huh.
The 6 value in some of the um, in code book mentioned 5, ma'am.
5. It cannot be
Yes.
5 though, because the elastic section modulus is which code have you seen? IS 800.
I thought.
See, it's BD square by 6, and it has a very clear.
Okay.
See, it comes basically from the like the moment of inertia is BD cube by 12. So the moment of inertia is BD cube by 12. That comes from basic solid mechanics, and then for to get the plastic section modulus, sorry, the elastic section modulus, we divide the moment of inertia by half the width or something like that. So it is BD cube by 12 divided by B by 2. So from that we get BD square by 6. I'm sure that it should be 6. I mean, the code sometimes puts approximation, some empirical approximations. Empirical means that it is not directly related to the physics or the mechanics. Instead, it is some values which have been observed from experiments or experiments and put. But this TS by 6 is a direct mechanics concept, so it should not change. Okay, if you have any source where it shows 5, you can show me. I can try to see what you are saying.
Currently, I don't have a ma'am. I will mail you, ma'am.
Okay, okay, you can mail. You can ask me any doubts afterwards as well.
Okay, sure, ma'am.
So, are there any other questions?
1 minute, ma'am.
Okay, then I'll thank you for attending.